a lot of times we think that our kid won't eat anything for school lunch because we just simply don't know how to pack that. Like my kids eat pancakes and I make amazing protein pancakes, but how am I going to pack those? You guys, I've got an exciting podcast today and Paula is here. Say hi, Paula.
Hey.
Yes, I am super excited about this. I mean, I'm practically jumping up and down on my chair because I love school lunches. I love everything about lunch. It is my favorite meal of the day. You should know that right off the bat. But it's also one of the reasons I started MOMables. And I wanted to pack healthy lunches for my kids when they were starting school. And I didn't know what to pack, right? And then I had picky eaters and I had to overcome how to pack nutritious foods, even though they only wanted to eat one thing. So today we are talking about school lunches and how to pack healthy lunches when your kid wants to eat the exact same lunch every day. Now, I'm really excited about this because that used to be me. You know, it's not like every lunch is different now because we still have some repeats, but it's gotten so much better. So I'm going to do some sharing today because sharing is caring. And I'm going to share some practical tips and real life mom advice that I know that it's going to be super, super helpful for you when packing your kids' lunches. Now, this episode is brought to you by Happier Plates. Happier Plates is our digital program that helps parents transform mealtimes and establish healthy eating habits in their kids. It is a step-by-step masterclass to empower parents to help their picky and selective eaters try new foods at all mealtimes, including lunchtime. So I'm going to have more information for you in the show notes. And if you're watching this as a video, it's going to be in the description box below. And while you're down there, make sure you grab a copy of the ultimate guide to feeding happy kids over at momables.com/feedinghappykids. So Paula, before we started recording, we were already talking about lunches and you were like, wait, hold up. Hold that question for when we get started. So ask me the question again so everyone can hear what we were going to start talking about without pressing record.
I know that you could talk lunches all day.
I will, guys, we're going to try to keep this one really short. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're going to really try to condense it to make sure I'm on point. That's why Paul is here, so I can stay on track and share my very best tips with you.
Well, I think what you said in the intro is really good. Like, it's very relatable to all of us moms because we've all had that moment where it's like, I'm trying to pack good lunches for my picky eaters, but they won't eat anything. And I don't even know where to begin.
Right. I know it can be really challenging because I receive hundreds of emails a week from parents who they really just don't even know what to feed their kids anymore. And not just at dinner, but at all meals. But school lunch, it's really problematic because it's one meal that our kids, they're eating away from us, right? Like, so breakfast, we can kind of like feed them and set them off for the day. And lunch, we are packing this food to go and we're wondering, like, number one, are they going to eat it? Number two, is it going to hold up? And number three, is it going to get squishy? You know, like we worry about so many things, right? Mm-hmm. As parents. And so, but lunch, you know, our kids are gone from us. Like if they're at school 8 hours of the day. So it is naturally something that parents worry about. So the first thing is know that you know your child best. And so, you know, build a list of foods that they will eat. So a lot of parents, when they email me or when I was asked, you know, what do you pack for lunch, for school lunch? A lot of these answers are what our kids won't eat. So like the first thing we need to change is our mind, do a little shift and make a list of the foods that our kids will eat. Even if it's like pork or chicken, bacon, like the things that you're like, this is so not school lunch. Well, the funny thing is that school lunch does not mean a sandwich. So when we make a list of what I call the will eat list, from that list, we can then extract out meals and figure out how to pack it, right? So a lot of times we think that our kid won't eat anything for school lunch because we just simply don't know how to pack that. Like my kids eat pancakes and I make amazing protein pancakes, but how am I going to pack those? And so then you just figure out the logistics of packing something other than a sandwich. But the first thing to do is to figure out what our kids will actually eat, which we talked about in a previous episode. Right. So the will eat list. And from there, build on a lunch.
So I think what really would be really helpful is to know how this list should look for lunchtime, because it's less just bullet points of what they'll eat. And I know you have a special structuring system to make sure that they have something that's really going to get them through the day for the rest of the school day. Right.
So I mean, you can simply break it down by food group if you want. So you could put like a proteins, a veggies list, a fruit list, a carbohydrates or starches, and then maybe even like a snack list, or I don't call it snacks. I just call it add-ons. So then my kids, they're things that we know that are going to be added into the lunchbox, or that's why they're add-ons, but they're not like the meal builders, right? Like we're not going to send my kid a bag of chips and a protein bar, right? Like the chips may be added onto a lunch, so, but anyway, so in proteins, like you can include eggs, chicken nuggets, cheese cubes, lunch meat, rotisserie chicken. So, and now if your mind already went to, how do I pack all those things? I mean, my kids get scrambled eggs or omelets inside of a thermos. I mean, if they eat it at other meals, they just take a thermos with them. They open it up and eat a hot lunch. So we even we have an entire video and a post on like my favorite thermos containers, because they don't all hold the same amount of food, and they don't all hold the food temperature as long. So I'm going to make sure to link that for you. But a thermos container, like I was just showing Paula before we were recording on FaceTime, my lunch container drawer, and we have like 6 thermoses because sometimes my kids take 2, one for one thing and one for the other. Like I have one kid I can put we had leftover rice and chicken from, or it was like rice and pork from dinner. So I just heated that up and I put it, I topped into a thermos for one son. The other son, he needs more volume and he also doesn't like his food touching. So he had a thermos for only rice and a thermos for only the meat, right? But so that's why I need a few more, but they're only like $10 to $15. So investing in a thermos that lasts years is a really great idea to put those proteins or those hot foods that are outside the sandwich, right? Veggies, they can be raw or they can be cooked. They can be in a soup, for example, if it's in a thermos, or they can be heated up as, last night's roasted veggies can be, you have some leftover pasta, you could just toss them into a thermos. So, but if you have a list of the foods, you can look at those foods and go, hey, do I have leftovers of this? Like some days my daughter just literally takes steamed broccoli inside of, like, I'll steam it really hot and I'll put it in a thermos, and then she takes that inside for lunch. And it's kind of crazy, but that's like a side for her, right? Instead of sending her carrot sticks, I may send her steamed broccoli. Fruit, make a list of fruits, fruits are kind of problematic sometimes for parents because they're like, I throw a banana in the lunch bag and it comes home all mushy, or it's all black, or my kid didn't eat it because then it gets really brown by lunchtime. Right. So maybe that's just not the food that you throw into the lunch bag. You save that for the afternoon snack. Or instead of packing the banana whole, maybe slice it up and create a fruit salad. So maybe you could make a big bowl of fruit salad for a couple of days in the refrigerator. And then now it's you can pack that in a container. So there's a variety of fruit and it's in a way that's not going to go bad or get mushy. But again, you're just going to mix and match the items in that will eat list to create those meals. Right.
I think one of the most discouraging things for mom is when you pick up your kid from school, you open up the backpack and nothing was eaten. How do you handle that in that moment and then planning going forward as well?
So how I handle that in today's moment, it is much differently than years ago where I used to lose it, to put it nicely, in the car with my son. And as I'm telling you this, I can see in my head how awful, and how ashamed I am of myself for yelling at my son or for losing my cool in the car. And when quite frankly, like, yes, sometimes it was about the food, but other times, and it's honestly, like, I think it came out of desperation because, and I know it did because, years of therapy will help you see where you're at. But it came out of desperation of trying to feed my child, who, whenever I took him to the pediatrician, my pediatrician would say, he's underweight, he's not thriving, he's not growing, and so I would feel really bad about parenting this one child because I was like, I'm doing something wrong. My child isn't growing, isn't thriving. And so it was really out of sheer frustration with myself and therefore with my child that I would just blow up, right? So I think it is really discouraging for many of us when you have this outside pressure, like from a physician or from family telling you your kid is, whether it's underweight or overweight, right? There's a lot of guilt and shame as a parent that we go through, and then we basically, we portray that onto our child where it's like we just, like a bomb went off.
Yeah.
So nowadays it is much different because I assume the best as opposed to assuming the worst. So some of the things that it's important to ask our kids when they get in the car, it's like not just how was your day, but yeah, it's great. And then from there on, I would go like, for many kids, lunchtime is the first opportunity to hang out with their friends, to have conversations, right? Yeah. So I would then learn like, how was lunch? It wasn't like, did you eat your lunch? Because that's like more accusatory. It's almost like, did you eat your lunch? Is the same as like, did you do your homework? Did you get this done? And so it's like, ooh, I'm afraid to answer, right? Yeah. So I would go like, hey, who did you sit next to today at lunch? And I'd be like, oh, I sat next to Tommy. And like, oh, what did you guys talk about? I was like, oh, da da da. And then I would go on to, oh, well, did you have enough time to eat your lunch? Because one of the things that I learned is that my kids' lunch period was only 25 or 35 minutes. So that's from the time the bell rang. So it takes a few minutes for the kids to get their stuff, line up and go outside, and then sit down or find somebody to sit with. And, if they have to go to the bathroom for whatever reason, so there's 10 minutes because they're going to meet their other friend in the bathroom line. And then, so you see what I'm getting to? So by the time my kids sometimes made it to the lunch table, it's really not about them not liking the food. It was more about the fact that they just simply didn't have enough time to eat it. And I didn't know that, right? So I learned that over time. But once I learned to step away from the, why didn't you eat your lunch today? Well, what was wrong with it? Like, what, you don't like that, but you ate it yesterday. Like, I didn't even give my child an opportunity to answer. Once I took a step back, I found out why they didn't have time to eat it. So then they're like, oh, well, I went to stop at the bathroom and then I didn't have time. And so by the time I got there, because I would open the thermos and I'm like, oh my gosh, like all the food is in here. And they're like, yeah, because I didn't want to open it because then it gets cold. So if it gets cold, then it'll be yucky after school. So if I just don't touch it, it's still hot. And I was like, oh, like that was just really a light bulb moment, So I would find out why. And then if they're like, you know what, I tried it and I didn't really like that. And I was like, oh, well, what was it about that you didn't like? Oh, well, then I found out more about it, right? So it's like the things that we talked about in the previous episode with texture or flavor. It's really about finding out why they didn't like certain food so that we can either serve it differently, reintroduce it in a different way, or just, honestly, like I just learned that recently, if you make certain sandwiches ahead of time, like they get, by the time they get to lunchtime, they get soggy and whatnot. Of course, I know that the sandwiches get soggy, but like I packed it and I made it ahead, and I didn't know that for that particular day, I put peanut butter on one side and jelly on the next. And then I put in a zip bag because we were moving. And so it didn't go in a lunch container. So it just got squished and the jelly came through. My son just, by the time he opened it, he was like grossed out. So I didn't know that. I'm like, I pack peanut butter and jelly, many times and like he eats it. Well, my kids they don't like when the sandwich is all squishy and disgusting and I don't blame them. Right. So, but I was like, why didn't he eat at all today? Right. And then I was blaming him because by the time the sandwich came home, it was like disastrous. Right.
Right.
And then of course, something that I learned is that they are hungry when they get back in the car. So instead of like immediately pushing out, many days I didn't even open the thermos. So instead of like pushing out that entire meal, throwing it out, and like there's a lot of things that that were in their lunch that they could eat. So I just gave them the opportunity to eat it on the way home while they told me about their day. So it was really like a casual eat and chat conversation that really became very positive, right? It was almost like they're having time, they're chatting with me and eating their food at the same time. Yeah. So that's something that you can do or maybe if your kid gets home from the bus and then they, whether you pick them up or they get off the bus and that's when you see that your kid did not touch their meal. It's, find out why, don't make assumptions, and then give them the opportunity to eat it if something's still good.
Okay, so going back to that zip lunch, I know that you're normally the lunch packing queen, but does it really matter how we pack lunches as long as things aren't getting squished?
I mean, of course it matters. I mean, it's like me asking you, so does going out to eat sushi at a sushi restaurant where they plate your sushi versus buying the piece of sushi at the grocery store in a plastic container, does it matter? I mean, it is the same California roll. For most people, really, it's about the eating experience, right? So, yes, the short answer is the food, the container that you pack it in matters simply because of how it's going to hold up that food. So, sometimes certain containers like zip bags can make something really unappealing just by how the food gets transported, right? Because it moves around and whatnot. So I found that like sturdy containers work best. I really like containers that keep foods that have compartments. Instead of like 5 containers, I like one with a few compartments because I can put everything in one and it takes up less room in my dishwasher, but also because it's like a bento box and kids just see the variety and the options right in there. And it separates wet foods from dry foods. And what I mean by that is like you can separate hummus from some pita bread, right? So that, or you can separate, if you say you send your child with ham, cheese, and crackers, right? So you can put the crackers in their own compartment so that they don't absorb any of the moisture from the other ones and then they're soggy by lunch. So that's really important. And of course, I already talked about thermos containers because I feel like this is such a great way of repurposing some of your kids' favorite foods that may be in your freezer or in your refrigerator. Sometimes that one serving of leftovers is somebody's lucky lunch 2 days later, at least at my house. So a thermos container is really a great investment for all of these. And lastly, I just want you to keep in mind that if you're struggling to pack lunches for your picky eaters because you feel like you're packing the same foods all the time, the biggest thing to remember is that it's totally okay to pack the same foods from time to time, right? Like if your child just wants turkey, then maybe you can come up with other things that just a turkey sandwich, right? You could make it into a wrap. You can make it on top of a salad. You can roll up the turkey with cheese by itself. You can make them into pinwheels. You can make it, so the possibilities are really endless with that one item that your child will eat. So just getting a little creative, and even browsing Pinterest or some of my YouTube videos, I've exhausted the one lunch, one ingredient, 5 different lunches ideas, because oftentimes our kids will only eat that one thing, right? So we're going to link a few up for you below here, but just, know that at the end of the day, if you're packing a variety of foods, then your child is going to get a variety of nutritious ingredients and nutrition from the food. And of course, like you mentioned earlier, Paula, I think we covered this in a previous episode. I really break it down in depth, lunch packing in our Happy Plates course, and give you a step-by-step guide on, the containers and what to do in the car, how to talk to your kids, and all of that. So we're going to make sure we link all of this for you. But I hope that today's episode was helpful, just to help you see that lunch is just another opportunity to introduce new foods.